So I don't know about you, but when I think of the word conflict, it makes me want to duck for cover. It scares me. It brings up a lot of chaos. I feel frightened. I feel like I want to avoid it. And I also feel like it's not right, wrong even. It brings up uncomfortable feelings for me, ones that I want to avoid. And I'm telling myself that this shouldn't be happening. Something's going wrong here. This is bad. This is wrong. And so naturally, conflict is something I want to avoid. Now, when we add conflict with romantic relationship, i.e. the closest person in your life that's meant to be a place of safety and security, I am definitely telling myself these two things shouldn't be happening at once and together. But unless you haven't noticed, I sure have. In all relationships, and even in, and probably most of all, our precious romantic relationships with the people who are closest to us, who we love the most, we will experience conflict. And conflict is different to communication. Conflict is where there's a disagreement. And the only time there's a disagreement is where there is something we care about. So it makes sense that in the context of a romantic relationship where we have two individuals who of course are going to have different opinions, which will result in disagreements, it means that there will be more disagreements because we really care about each other. We care about our life together. We're in love. So conflict actually becomes something that is more present in a romantic relationship. But for a lot of us, including me, we have been conditioned to believe that conflict is bad. And so we set out on a path where we're trying to find someone where conflict will just not happen. That leads you to be in relationships where you might not have conflict, but there's not a sense of deep connection with one another. And on the other hand, some of you are experiencing so much conflict. You've got a fiery, passionate relationship, but if you take the conflict out of that relationship, what have you got left? That's a really good test for your relationship. This is what we're talking about today in this episode. Conflict, and not just conflict, but conscious conflict. How to have a healthy, peaceful, and positive relationship with conflict in a romantic relationship that will actually support you and your partner to create more connection through conflict rather than conflict destroying your connection, your relationship, and also destroying your nervous systems because it's incredibly stressful when we're in a conflict to our nervous systems. We all go back into fight and flight mode. It takes us back to childhood and it's incredibly stressful. In today's episode, you're going to learn how to turn that around so that conflict is safe, conflict is harmonious, and you're able to face disagreements in a way that doesn't make your nervous system go into a complete meltdown. Welcome to Relate Higher, a podcast dedicated to providing the leading standard in conscious higher relating and to teaching you a conscious framework for all of your relationships. This is your go-to resource for developing meaningful, conscious relationships across your life. I'm your host, award-winning relationship coach and consultant and former family lawyer, Leticia Ringe. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the podcast, everyone. In today's episode, I am introducing you to a concept I call conscious conflict. You are going to understand how conflict is usually approached when we approach conflict unconsciously, what that cycle tends to look like and how it's very destructive to you as an individual as well as to your relationship as a whole, and how you can instead move into a conscious conflict cycle with your partner or a future partner so that you can have conflict that actually creates connection and feels safe to you and your partner and your beautiful nervous systems, which get really, really triggered when we're in a disagreement with one another. To get started, I want you to think about some questions. The first is, what words come up for you when you think of the word conflict, especially in the context of your romantic relationship? And what was modeled to you about conflict in romantic relationships when you were a child? What words come up for you about that? And finally, how do you feel when there is conflict? What emotions are typically most present for you? And how do you tend to respond to conflict? What behaviors and patterns do you see yourself going into? Before we dive into the episode today, including my own experience of conflict, which I'll be telling you all about in this episode, I want to make sure that those of you listening to the podcast are aware that in my conscious relationship coaching program, I work with people in and outside of relationship to support you to create a thriving romantic partnership in your life. For those of you who are in a romantic relationship, this one-to-one or couples coaching program will help you to get clear on what you really want and need in your relationship to thrive and what protective patterns are getting in the way of both you and your partner and the thriving dynamic and relationship ecosystem that's possible. Alternatively, if you and your partner are deciding whether to complete the relationship or stay in it, I take you through a process that will help you get clarity on whether you two are right for each other and also help you to learn the skills you'll need in a relationship, whether it's with each other or not. You can do this with your partner or as an individual because it only takes one person to really shift a dynamic, though if both of you get involved, it's even more powerful. Or you might not be in a relationship right now. I also work with people who are single and in between relationships to help you get really clear on what you want and need in a relationship and set you up with the skills needed to create a thriving relationship in the future. We also, across all of these different relationship cycle phases, look at your protective patterns because your protective patterns are the very thing that is stopping you from creating the love and thriving relationship you desire. If you'd love to know more about that, submit your application at relatehigher.com/CRCP. Okay, back to the episode. Okay, so now you've got some words, some emotions, and some behaviors that come up for you when you think of the word conflict. Now, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, which is all about communication, I recommend you go back and listen to that episode because it will help you understand what we're talking about in today's episode even deeper. So conflict, as I mentioned, is different to communication. Conflict is when our communication is at odds with one another. Now we are disagreeing with each other. And usually when we're in a disagreement, it's because we care about the topic we're disagreeing about or what it represents, what we're making it mean about ourselves, about our partner, and about our relationship. It's inevitable that conflict will arise because of this closeness, because of this intimacy, and because we care about each other deeply. And that's a direct result of being two individuals. It is normal for there to be disagreements, for there to be different opinions. And the reason it happens so much in a romantic relationship is because of the closeness, the love, and the connection. It's because we care about one another. What's a problem is the way we respond to conflict. When conflict arises, instead of remembering that we're both here in this relationship because we love and care about each other, instead of remembering that this person is allowed to have a different point of view and I'm allowed to have a different point of view, we get triggered unconsciously into protective strategies that we have been using since we were a child. When you reflect on your childhood and what was happening when you experienced conflict, generally, you will notice that the same strategies you used to soothe yourself or to avoid conflict, to protect yourself in those times of conflict, are the same strategies that are showing up in your romantic relationship. And what also tends to happen is that your protective strategies, not only do they block you from getting the love and the thriving relationship you desire, but they also tend to trigger our partner's protective strategies. So it becomes this cycle where one of you gets triggered and your response to that trigger then triggers your partner, who then responds in this protective, closed off to love, unhealthy way. And it becomes this vicious cycle that keeps repeating. So you keep responding to each other's triggers and then we don't usually repair or do anything. We just get over it and then we move on and then we wait until the next trigger. And then we repeat the cycle and it just keeps and keeps happening Over time, what happens, because this is unresolved and it's not processed in a healthy, conscious way with love, awareness, and intention, which is what a conscious relationship is all about, it tends to chip away at us as individuals, and it chips away over time on our connection as a relationship. So the experiences we had around conflict as a child and the experiences we've had since then directly impact our relationship with our romantic partner. Let me give you an example of this. When I was a child, there was a lot of conflict in my family. I grew up with a family who had lots of explosive arguments. It would lead with lots of yelling, doors slamming. Sometimes it led with divorce. Other times it led with people driving off and didn't know when they were going to come back. It was very chaotic. And so for me and my little child self-nervous system, that was too much. I was totally overwhelmed. So what I would do is either, if the conflict was directed at me, is I would fight and defend, or if the conflict didn't involve me, I would withdraw to my bedroom, I would maybe put on some TV, or I would get lost in my busy life. I would have a busy social life, busy work, just lots of things happening for me, and I would escape into those areas in order to avoid the conflict and keep myself safe. This was a protective strategy that I learned as a child, and whenever I felt like something might blow up, I quickly would withdraw. I learned how to also keep the peace and try to save the day, and so I was always on high alert for when there could be an eruption. This is what it means to walk on eggshells. I was really familiar with that term, and that's something that you might be familiar with too. So when it came to my relationships, in my first long-term romantic relationship, which we were in a relationship for 5 years, my partner and I had lots of arguments, and I simply mimicked the relationship I saw between my caregivers at the time, which was very explosive. We would have fights, I would go into defense mode and then defend and fight and yell, and so would he. So we both would just create even more chaos in the relationship. Once that relationship ended, I knew I needed to do things differently. Then in my next relationship, I had a much healthier relationship with conflict, but it was a direct result of the person I chose. He wasn't as explosive as me, and he was much better at conflict management and resolution. So if I had an explosive moment, it would usually be quickly resolved and we would repair and then move on. It wasn't until the later years of our relationship, when we had long-standing conflict over a big life issue about our future, that I really didn't know how to manage that, and neither did he. I believed that this meant something is completely wrong with our relationship and we shouldn't be in it. And so did he, because that's the message that we get from society. So I never learned how to actually process a conflict in a healthy way, one that you really care about and one that is long-standing, until after that relationship. And in fact, it was in the next relationship I was in, which was a short-term relationship, a relationship of under a year, where I really learned to apply this conscious approach to conflict. And in this approach, which we'll talk about later in this episode, we created really intentional containers for conflict. So when a trigger would come up, we had a process for dealing with that. And then when we wanted to explore that trigger and the conflict, we had a particular structure for that. And then we also had a process for repairing after a conflict. And this was in a relationship with two quite fiery people. But through that process, we managed to use conflict for connection. And it was incredible and incredibly healing for us as individuals, as well as for our relationship. So as you can see, what happens in relationships is that we bring our experiences as a child and those protective strategies we've learned to keep us safe into every romantic relationship we're in. And unless we're conscious and aware that we're responding in these ways that are actually creating more conflict, we simply keep repeating the cycle, and it triggers our partner, who then also is contributing to the cycle, and it becomes this real whirlwind that's hard to stop. But one person can make a huge difference in a relationship. For instance, in my second relationship, my partner at that time was really, really good with conflict management. And so he made a huge difference in my own experience of conflict. And so I want you to know that if you're in a relationship right now and your partner has no interest in understanding conflict resolution, there is a lot that you can shift just by focusing on this yourself. What these three examples show is how my experience of conflict as a child led me to taking on coping strategies, which I call protective patterns, to keep me safe in conflict, that I then brought into every single relationship I've been in. In each relationship, I learned something new about conflict, and my experience was a little different based on the other person in the relationship. But my experience, my response to conflict was always the same. And it took me becoming consciously aware of what was happening within me to be able to stop those behaviors and lead to better connective strategies that were actually going to give me what I wanted. In the first example, I had no awareness. So my partner and I were just triggering and re-triggering each other and creating more and more conflict that eventually destroyed our relationship over time. Our nervous systems were just always in that flight and fight response, walking on eggshells, waiting for the next time to erupt. So even if you come together after a conflict, if you haven't truly repaired and you haven't truly come up with strategies to help you resolve conflict, agreements for resolving conflict, what happens is you and your partner, even though you might trust each other consciously, on an unconscious body lens, you're not trusting each other. You're waiting on the defense for the next time an eruption occurs. Then in my second relationship, because I had a different partner who was much better at managing conflict, our experience of conflict generally was much better. It was more harmonious. And that shows you that one person in a relationship can make a huge difference. Yes, I was more conscious at this point in my own life evolution, but a huge piece of it was that he was really conscious of his own conflict management. That made a big difference for us. It also shows that my belief that conflict is bad and his belief that conflict is bad led us being unable to find strategies that would lead to connection when we did experience a conflict over a long-standing time, over something that we both really cared about. And then in the third example, even though we were both quite fiery in nature, because we had the structure, the process, and the consciousness and understanding of ourselves, we were able to use conflict to create more connection and understanding with each other, and also to give both of us a different point of reference when it comes to conflict. And this is what you have the ability to do in your relationship or your next relationship too. We want to help the little you, the inner child within you, have a better relationship with conflict through your romantic relationship. When both you and your partner commit to that, really incredible things are possible. Okay, so what is conscious conflict? When you think about conflict, I want you to break it down into 3 steps. There is the trigger, there is an intentional container that you create to explore that conflict, and then there is a repair conversation that's needed. All conflict needs these 3 steps, though sometimes they're done in a much shorter time, and in other times, the bigger the conflict, they will be done over a longer period of time. Let's give an example of this. Let's say we're in a relationship and one person in the relationship, their protective strategy when something upsets them and they are upset with their romantic partner is to withdraw, is to pretend like everything's okay. It's a bit of a people-pleasing self-protection strategy. But then something will happen that will trigger that person to erupt. So they bottle it in, they don't say anything, and then finally they get pushed to their limit and then they erupt into anger, yelling, and explosion of some sort. We've all probably dealt with someone like this. Now, your partner, perhaps their protective strategy when they're dealing with conflict is then to move into hypervigilance and Mr. or Mrs. fix-it mode. And so they start trying to save the day and fix everything and micromanage and make sure their partner's okay. They become really, really attentive, but they forget to attend to themselves and they take way too much responsibility for their partner's emotional experience. This cycle will continue to happen. So one person will erupt, the other person will respond and start trying to fix everything and become possibly even a little bit overbearing, and then they'll get over it and then they'll just move throughout life in their relationship until it happens again. And so it's this unconscious cycle. And for both people in that circumstance, they're both remaining in a heightened state of stress, fight and flight, waiting for the next eruption, waiting to have to self-protect, waiting to be on the defense, and not truly getting to the real issue beneath this. Now, the opportunity here for this cycle is for both parties to transcend their protective strategies so that they're not walking around on eggshells with each other, even if that's on an unconscious body and nervous system level only. But instead, they're actually meeting these protective strategies head on, and they're coming together to support each other and their little selves in the relationship feel safe with each other when there is a conflict. So the first person in this example, they might need to learn how to lean in and have a conversation with their partner much sooner than when they usually do, which is when they've erupted, and they have the conversation when they're triggered and when they're really angry. Instead, when they first notice that they're upset about something, they might want to take a moment to withdraw, to process and look at what upset them, understand it more themselves, come to a place where they're regulating their nervous system, and then they want to ask their partner in a very polite and respectful way, hey, can we create space tonight to have a conversation about something that has upset me? I really want to talk through it with you. Then your partner is able to go away and prepare for that conversation. When they have a process to follow to help them to regulate their nervous system and to come to that conversation from a place of openness and connection and love and wanting to lean in and understand rather than getting ready to fight or moving into that protective mode of fixing it, this is an opportunity for this person to have a different point of reference whenever there is a conflict or their partner's not happy with something. It allows them to actually fully see their partner and also see their partner is responsible for their own emotional experience. And then it also allows them, after that conversation, to go away and reflect and think about, where am I responsible for what my partner has brought to me? How could I improve things in a way that's actually healthy rather than a default response that's coming from a place of fear and protection? This is going to be much healthier for both of these people in the relationship over time. So what we're seeing here is we have a process for the trigger. When the trigger happens, instead of dealing with the trigger right now and responding from the trigger or having the conversation immediately because it feels urgent, this person who has the trigger is going to go away and examine the trigger first, understand why they're upset, get themselves to a place where they're not in a fight and flight state. Then they're going to bring that to their partner and they're going to create a container to have an intentional, clearing conversation with their partner about whatever it was that triggered them and why they're upset, so that their partner can understand why they're upset, and also so that the person bringing the issue can also more deeply understand why they're upset. During this clearing conversation, there's going to be no solutions. The process is simply going to allow the person who is upset to be fully seen and heard. And if the partner has anything that they need to add to that, they will have the opportunity to be seen and heard too, if relevant. Then after that, there will be a time for a repair conversation where both people in the relationship come back and they talk about what they've learned in hindsight, and they take responsibility for how they're going to show up and move forward as a result of that understanding they had in the initial conversation. The reason so many of our conflicts go bad is because we just try to resolve the conflict way too quickly. Usually we want to do it right then and there when the trigger is happening, or we wait until the trigger is much more explosive and we just want to get it over with, instead of really trying to understand what is happening for my partner here. What is their experience? What is really going on for them? When you hold that space for your partner, it doesn't mean that you're taking responsibility for everything that's happening for your partner. It means you're giving them time and space to fully understand and see themselves so that they can access a deeper truth within them. It also gives you the opportunity then later to go and process and then decide, hey, was I contributing in some way to that dynamic? And is there a way that I want to shift the way I'm approaching that particular situation so that we can create a better dynamic? So you and your partner become teammates together in this beautiful conversation, and it was because of the conflict. You both trust each other to come to a place of resolution together. And because it's done over time, it gives you the time to work through your emotional wave rather than reacting from your emotions at that time. It allows for an expanded awareness. It allows for hindsight, which is going to allow you and your partner to be more collaborative and come together and come up with really good solutions. When you respond to conflict as if it's urgent, it's also just reinforcing to your body, your nervous system, and your mind, and the little self within you that this is something we need to have over with as soon as possible. It's bad, it's wrong, we need to be in protection, it's stressful, rather than, okay, we have an uncomfortable emotion here that someone's experiencing. There's a reason for this. We have an opportunity to understand ourselves more deeply here. We have an opportunity to work through this together. And it's not urgent. It doesn't need to all be resolved right now. What we need to do is care for ourselves along the way so that we're coming at it from a very regulated, calm place, because from that place, we're able to come together in connection rather than disconnection. When you approach conflict in this way, it leads you to having a much better reference point for conflict, one that will lead you to feeling safe around conflict and with the tools to approach conflict in a way that really supports you to end that conflict in a place of resolution and calmness and repair, rather than in a place where we're just pretending it didn't happen and then we're actually living on edge waiting for the next eruption to take place. It also allows you to bring those skills into all of your other relationships, your professional relationships, your relationship with family, and also your relationship with friends, because our protective patterns show up in all our relationships and they show up across every area of our life. And then thirdly, it allows you to have better strategies for dealing with conflict across your life as a whole, especially if you see conflict as simply resistance, where something you don't want to happen is happening. How do you deal with that? How do you manage that in a way that's healthy and that doesn't stress your nervous system out and instead allows you to lean in and learn from the experience rather than running away from it or getting defensive or making it mean something terrible about you and that particular area of your life or your relationship? So to step into conscious conflict, you need to take 3 steps. The first is you need to understand what your protective patterns and strategies are in relationships and in life. This is the primary work I do with all my clients in my conscious relationship coaching program. Whether you're single and between relationships or in a relationship right now, your protective strategies are what are blocking your core desires from being met in a relationship. It is fascinating work, and it's also uncomfortable because it requires you to look at and take responsibility for how you're contributing to conflict and to the dynamic that you're experiencing in your romantic life and also in your relationships. The second step is you need to have structure, tools, and agreement. My previous episode about communication will give you some of those tools. If you want to learn more, this is something I also support you with in my conscious relationship coaching program. And thirdly, you need practice. It is not a quick fix. changing unconscious patterns and ways of relating, especially in regards to conflict. You need to practice. So you might think once you've got awareness of your protective pattern, that is it, you're all good to go, everything will change. You will be surprised how it's so hard to change because you keep going back into those default ways of relating that just lead to more conflict. So it's something you've got to commit to practicing over time. Just like any habit, it takes practice, and over time you get better and better at it. But you will fail and you will make mistakes, and that's okay. Remember, you're changing a lifetime of protective coping strategies, but it's worth it because it's your protective strategies that are getting in the way of the love and relationship as well as the life that you truly desire. So in my conscious relationship coaching program, you have the space to practice, and it's done in a structured way that will really support you to transmute protective patterns and create a better relationship dynamic for any person you're in a relationship with, especially a current or a future romantic partner. Once again, if you want to know more about that, head to relatehigher.com/CRCP. I work with people in relationship and outside of relationship. I work with people one-to-one and also with couples. All right, everybody. So to summarize, in today's episode, we talked about the unconscious conflict cycle that most people are in when it comes to their romantic relationship. We also spoke about the difference between conflict and communication and why most people have a negative relationship with conflict. We spoke about conscious conflict and how it can support you to have a better point of reference for conflict generally in your nervous system and body as well as your mind, and how conscious conflict supports you to create connection, understanding, deeper love and intimacy in your relationship. In that, we talked about the 3 phases of a conflict and what is needed at each phase. And we also talked about the 3 steps that need to be taken in order to step into conscious conflict. In our next episode, we'll be talking about the 4th C to a conscious romantic relationship, which is all about connection, sex, and intimacy. I'll see you in that episode. Goodbye. Thank you for listening to Relate Higher, your go-to resource for learning how to consciously approach all of your relationships. To deepen your learning and practice, make sure you're subscribed to receive the Relate Higher community newsletter. This is a weekly newsletter sent to you every Monday, providing further coaching and education to support your relationships. Subscribe at relatehigher.com/community. And if you haven't yet left a 5-star review for the podcast, we ask that you please do that now so that this podcast can reach other listeners who also want to learn and practice conscious higher relating. Because remember, the more people who learn, the better relationships we all enjoy.